Hi, I'm Brittany, a neurodivergent mum and speech pathologist. This is Not Just Theories, where I share what actually works in my real, messy life. Because life doesn't follow a theory. Here's what I actually do. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Not Just Theories. Today, we are finishing off our little play series by talking about independent play. So talk a little bit about what it is, why it matters, how to support it without guilt or pressure. Because if you have ever found yourself wishing your child would just play by themselves for 5 minutes and then immediately felt bad for thinking it, you are not alone. We all know that play is important. We've talked about it a few times already on this podcast, but being your child's constant playmate isn't the goal either. So actually, independent play is a really valuable skill for children to develop because it builds confidence and it builds their imagination and it builds problem solving and emotional regulation. And there are so many benefits to independent play. But this is the big thing. Not all kids are wired the same way when it comes to playing independently. So if you're listening and thinking, my child has never in their life played quietly on their own, it doesn't mean you've done anything wrong. And in fact, depending on the age of your child, they might not actually be at the stage where they can play independently, depending on their personality type. Because that's one of the biggest lessons I've learned so far as a parent. Kids come into the world with different temperaments from day one. My eldest, for example, has just always needed more support and more input. Even as a baby, like her first day of life onwards, she would cry the second we walked away or put her down. She just always wanted connection or eyes on her or involvement or movement or sensory input of some kind. My youngest is a completely different story. From birth, again, the first day of his life, he's been more comfortable either entertaining himself or being left alone. He was a baby who could lie on the playmat for a couple of minutes, just lying there looking at the world while I made myself a cup of tea. And you know what's funny? I used to feel really guilty about how much less independent my eldest was with play because I thought maybe I'd done something wrong and taught her to rely on me too much. Maybe I'd spent too much time entertaining her as a baby, not leaving her on the mat. But after seeing how different the starting point was for my second kid, I realized a lot of it was temperament, not training, because I couldn't walk away from her and leave her on the mat without her screaming or crying or getting upset. From just the very second she came, out into the world, she was less independent. And I mean, not to say she's actually in some ways very independent. She's quite, in charge and confident in a lot of ways, but I guess independent. She wasn't interested in being by herself in the same way that my son, look, he would happily potter around, just keeping himself entertained. And my dad summed it up really well when he sort of acknowledged that my eldest needs constant entertainment and my youngest needs constant supervision. And that just puts it out there, same kids, same house, same parents, but from day one, different levels of independence and different levels of confidence entertaining themselves. So that's okay. I guess that's probably the biggest point here is that if your child is, 3 or 4 years old and they don't play by themselves, it's not necessarily that you've done anything wrong. And I think it's easy to look back and go, did I entertain them too much? But actually, it's a bit of a chicken and the egg problem. Were you entertaining them that much as a baby because they needed more entertainment than this other child who was maybe a bit more independent? So it's really chicken and the egg. But we do know that temperament plays a huge role, and you can't necessarily go back and blame yourself for going, I didn't give them enough opportunity to be independent, because it might have been that your child didn't allow you to allow them the opportunity to be independent because of their temperament. So, get rid of that parental guilt. I know it's easier said than done. It's probably been one of the most healing parts of having a second kid who is so different to my first, is that I can truly look back and go, wow, it actually wasn't me. They are just different kids. My kid is not the same as that other kid who would happily entertain themselves for 2 hours and their parents could go and do, all of these yoga and Pilates class and their kid would just lie on the mat next to them while they did those things. That wasn't an option for me as a first-time parent. And yet, with my second, I was able to go to those mums and bubs Pilates class, and he still needed a bit more entertainment than some of the others, but it's all relative. I was able to do something with him just lying on the mat next to me, which would have been inconceivable with my first. All that's out of the way. Temperament is different. You're not necessarily to blame if your kid's not doing independent play. But if your child is a little bit older and you're wanting to try and move towards how to work towards independent play, and you've got maybe a child who's a little bit more clingy, a little bit needing more connection, here are some of the things that have worked for me with my eldest. So one of the tools that helps me find a middle ground between entertaining my child and, trying to force them to play independently when they don't want to, is something called an invitation to play. So I'm sure you've seen these floating around social media. You can see beautiful photos of all these beautiful setups with like sensory trays and themed activities, and they can be so gorgeous. I've talked about them before. I absolutely love the idea behind them. The idea is to create an opportunity that sparks your child's curiosity and interest in playing. So they're fantastic, but they do come with hidden pressure, because I know that the more effort I put in, the more I expect my kids to actually use the activity. So when they walk straight past it, or they only spend a minute playing with it when it took me 15 minutes to set up, it's really hard not to feel disappointed. So I have a rule for myself. No invitation to play should ever take more than 2 minutes to set up. 2 minutes max. So that way, if they're ignoring it completely, it is absolutely fine. I've only invested 2 minutes. So it keeps light, stays an invitation rather than an obligation. And sometimes the simple setups are the ones that spark the most engagement anyway. So just putting out a basket of blocks and a cardboard box can spark this amazing idea, whereas putting out an elaborate setup might just be something to destroy. And less is more. And that's what ties back to in that toy rotation episode. When there's less visual clutter of the toy space, kids can see what's available and make their own choices. And the other thing that's really important to talk about here is boredom. So you'll hear it a lot. It's really good for kids to be bored. And it is true. Boredom is a space where creativity starts to grow. If you overschedule and over-entertain your child, they're not ever going to learn the skills of independence. But if your child is one of those children who is a little bit higher needs, who needs a little bit more connection, who struggles with boredom more than other kids, finds it harder to spark something off, it kind of leaves them stuck. So again, some kids need that spark to get going. So it might be that invitation to play, and it might be something else. So I know that I have 2 children. I have one child who just finds something to do when he's bored. I mean, he's only 1 and he'll just start doing something. We'll be waiting in a waiting room and he'll just find something and he'll start, I'm going to pick up this bit of rubbish that I found and put it in the bin because that's fun. He might also find a bin and start pulling things out of it. So he's not always going to find something to do that I want him to do. But gosh, he'll find something that will keep himself occupied. I just need to supervise him and make sure he's doing things that are safe and hygienic. My other kid is the one who's like, I'm bored, there's nothing to do. And you can sit there and like suggest. And they're like, no, I don't want to do that. And so neither of those responses is wrong. They just have different thresholds for initiative. And if your child needs a spark and you don't want to do the invitation to play idea, you can offer gentle nudges. So this is not telling your child what to do. Often these kids respond really poorly to directives. It's really frustrating sometimes when your kid is bored and you're trying to suggest options for them to do and they're just shooting them down because as soon as you've suggested it, they're like, absolutely, I do not want to do this thing that you have told me to do. So rephrasing it rather than a direction, but offering it as an option or it's actually an invitational way of phrasing what you're saying. So rather than saying, why don't you play with your cars? Or I can see your dolls over there, why don't you just play with them? or there's a box, try putting something in. All of these things that it puts a demand on your kid, and a lot of toddlers, their instinct when they hear a demand is to say absolutely not, even if it's something that they might have enjoyed doing. So thinking of ways that you can phrase your suggestions that are not going to immediately have your child going, that was a demand, don't do that. And it's a lot of using wondering words. So things like, oh, I wonder what your cars are up to today, instead of saying, why don't you play with your cars? Or, oh, is that dolly asleep? So you're sort of asking them a question to get them to engage with the toy of the doll rather than telling them to play with it. Or if you see a box, you can say, oh, what could that box be used for? So you're lighting a match. You're not like building the whole fire for them. You're not sitting and entertaining them with it, but you're helping spark that fire and then trying to step back a little bit. So this is, some kids don't need this. Some just need that silence and they'll do it themselves. But if your kid is like my eldest, hopefully that helps. So rephrasing things to be more questions that prompt them to initiate on their own rather than telling them what to do can just be a really nice way of shifting from that, like having your suggestions just getting completely shot down. Another thing that's really been helpful for me is that understanding that independent play can often start with connections. The idea is not teaching your kid to just go away and play. The idea is to build their sense of safety so they can play without you right beside them. So if your child struggles with this, try starting not by asking them to go away and play by themselves, but start by playing together for a couple of minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Join their world, connect, fill their emotional cup, be that tuned in dance partner that I talked about in my last episode. And then when they're really engaged in that play, say something like, I need to duck to the toilet, but I'll be right back. Or I'm just going to go hang out the washing, keep playing. I'll come see what you've built when I'm back. And the key here is really short breaks and then actually coming back. So the idea is to show them, I do leave, but I always return. And for your kid, that might be as simple as turning away for 10 seconds before you turn back into the game. So turning around and saying, oh, 1 second, I just need to look at something over here, and then turning back. You might need to start that small, like 10 seconds, and then build up the length of time that your child can trust that you are going to come back. You are going to notice what they do and stretch that distance and the time as they demonstrate that they can carry on without you. So this might happen really quickly once they've got the idea, especially for older kids. They might sort of go, okay, I can wait longer, or I'm more interested in this play, so I don't notice the time passing quite as much. You might be able to jump straight to, oh, I'll go hang out the washing and I'll come back. To be honest, if you're at that, your child might already have been one of the ones who was a temperament that might have been more independent, and this might be a bit more about you letting them have that independent play. But other kids, it might take months. It might even take years of being really consistent, and that is okay. Because the goal is to help them feel secure enough to try playing alone. It's not to cause them distress. Some kids might benefit from an actual timer. So you can set a timer and say, I will be back in 1 minute. And when the time beeps, come back in that 1 minute. Set a 2-minute timer, go out, come back at the 2-minute mark. And obviously none of this is, I'm not talking about locking your kid in the room while I do this. It's just saying, okay, we're in this really fun play activity. We're building this amazing tower. I wonder how tall you can build this tower while I go and put the kettle on and then come back. Okay, the kettle's boiled now. I'm going to go and make my cup of tea and then I'm going to come back. And if your child wants to, stop building the blocks and come with you to build the tea, because some kids will want to do that, that's fine. I mean, obviously, ideally, we want them to be stretching these muscles. But if you try and they don't do it, that's okay. Try again another time. That might be the kid who you really need to start with just being in the same room, but slightly further away for that 20 seconds rather than a minute. So thinking about things that you can do in the same room as your child while they play. So you can go, okay, well, you're following me out, but I'm making my cup of tea and I can't have it right next to the tower because I don't want it to get knocked down. I don't want it to spill. So I'm going to put my cup of tea a meter away behind me. So I'm going to take a series of 10-second breaks from playing with you to turn around, drink a sip from my cup of tea, and then I'm turning around and joining you again. Or you might be going, okay, well, I'm going to go get the washing out of the dryer and I need to fold it. So I'm going to fold it here in the room next to you, and I'm going to fold a towel over here 2 meters away from you, and then I'm going to come see what you're doing. And I'm going to go fold 2 towels, and then I'm going to come and sit back down with you. Now I'm going to go fold 3 towels and come back. So you can really scale this to how long your child can deal with you being not involved in the play and how far away you can be during that time. So those are 2 factors you can play with. You might be able to go for longer, but be in the same room, or you might be able to go out to a different room, but it has to be a shorter period of time. And you can play with those variables and gradually build it up. So the idea being, the ideal world, you'll be able to sit down with your kid, get them set up into a play activity, and then you can say, I'm going to go and take 10 minutes of me time. I'm going to just go have some mummy time. I'm going to make myself a cup of tea. I'm going to come back in 10 minutes to see what amazing thing you've built me or amazing thing you've drawn or whatever activity it is while I was gone. And you can do this with them in the living room or the bedroom, whatever. It doesn't really matter. But the benefit of this independent play is it's twofold, because it's fantastic for your child to build these problem-solving skills, creative play skills for themselves, but also it gives parents a little bit of a break from that constant entertaining of your kid. And if your child has that temperament that naturally is less likely to do this, you need the break even more, because they're always on you. They're always with you. It feels never ending. Whereas if your kid's a bit more naturally prone to independent play, you're not necessarily going to need to work on it quite as much. And you probably don't need that actual breather from them in quite the same way. I've had one of each, and the days I'm home with one kid versus the other, I tell you what, I feel so different at the end of the day with how drained I was, even with the age difference. Even though my youngest technically needs me more for things like helping feed him, helping dress him, changing nappies, all of that sort of stuff, I actually feel less exhausted at the end of the day with him, because in between those, he might do 10 minutes of independently kicking a ball around the house, or independently putting tea bags into my laundry or something silly like that. Whereas my eldest, even though she's more independent with tasks like dressing and toileting and feeding, she wants to be literally sitting on me all the time, or touching me or with me, and it's more draining in a very different way. So here's what independent play looks like in our home right now. My eldest needs that connection before she settles into play. So if I start by joining her, even if it is just for a few minutes, she's more likely to continue on her own once I step away. And I'm only doing it for really brief periods of time still. She's 3.5. I can leave her for independent play for maybe 2 minutes with an activity that I've set up while I do something really specific. So I'll sit with her. She might be building with Duplo, and she might be building a house. And I'll get into it and I'll say, wow, this house is looking fantastic. I'm just going to go make a cup of tea, and then I'll be back to see what you built. And then when I come back, I make sure to notice something really specific that she's done. Oh, wow, you added a new room. Or, oh, what's this you put into the bedroom? So I'm reinforcing that her play still matters to me, even if I wasn't there when she did it. So still putting in the effort to really notice what she did. And that also means she's less likely to follow me out to make that cup of tea because I am noticing what she did while I was gone. Whereas if I just didn't say anything about it and joined in, maybe there'd be a part of her that would wonder, like, oh, what was the point in playing while mum wasn't here? But trying to really almost reward that independent play by noticing it and showing her how important it was to me means she's more likely, not always, more likely to have kept playing while I was gone. So it's a really small tweak, but it did make such a huge difference. And having it be something that's so concrete. So if I just told her I'm going to go for 3 minutes and then come back, wouldn't mean much to her at this point, not without setting a timer. And if I set a timer, I know what she's like. She will just watch the timer count down. She won't actually keep playing. We've tried it. It's great for when I'm desperate for quiet time. I'll set up a timer and she'll just watch it count down. She'll just sit and watch the timer until it goes off. But it's not really great for independent play. So I don't do timers. I will name a specific task, one that you can kind of hear happening from her bedroom as well. Like, I'm going to go turn on the kettle and then I'll come back. And then when the kettle boils, we hear that and I go, oh, kettle's boiled. I'm going to go make myself a cup of tea, and then I come back. So she knows that that's only, 30 seconds or a minute each time. and she trusts that I'll come back, and I do come back and I have my cup of tea, and I'll even say things like, oh, I'm so glad I've got my cup of tea and I can play with you again. So I think, keeping it really concrete for that age. With the older kids, you might be able to do, just say I need X amount of time, but being concrete with the younger ones really helps. My youngest, on the other hand, he's already just happy to potter around independently for stretches of time. If I need to go make a cup of tea, I just go and make a cup of tea. I don't need to announce it. I don't need to announce when I've come back. I don't need to praise him for what he did while I was away. Same house, same parents, totally different play personalities. It is not something you can control. So if there's one message I want to leave you with today, it's this: you are not failing if your child needs more from you than what another child needs from their parent. Independent play is not a race. It is not a marker of how good a parent you are. Either way, if your child's super independent, it's not necessarily a sign that you've done anything wrong and your child's not connected to you. It just means that particular child has a temperament that means that they need less scaffolding, whereas some children do need more connection, more gradual steps before they can move towards that independent play. You're not doing your child a disservice by being responsive. You're meeting them where they are. The independence will come not by forcing it, but by building trust and really meeting a child where they're at and helping them really gradually step from there. I mean, obviously, like with everything I say, there are going to be situations where this does not apply to your child. So there are some children who, no matter what you do, they're not going to play independently, and that doesn't mean that you've done anything wrong. These are the strategies that worked for me or are working in my household. It's not going to be a magic bullet for everybody. There are some family situations where this isn't going to work. So please don't take this personally. I mean, this is just strategies that have worked in my house and ways of thinking about independent play that have been really helpful for me when I'm looking at my two kids with such different needs. So whether your child loves to play solo for hours or needs you within eyesight, within touch at all times, both can be so normal. With both of them, start with connection, try invitations to play, try phrasing suggestions to play in a way that aren't going to get that, real toddler demand avoidance happening. Remember, boredom can be a gift, but above all, independence grows from feeling safe, not from being pushed away. So you can do this, you can scaffold it just as slowly as your kid needs to. And it might take weeks, it might take months, it might take years. We're playing the long game here. Thanks for joining me today for this episode of Not Just Theories. If this topic resonated with you, I would absolutely love it if you could share it with another parent who is in a season of trying to cook dinner while their child clings to their leg, because I really hope that that parent will find this helpful and that they'll feel seen. So I'll talk to you all next week. Goodbye. Thanks so much for listening to Not Just Theories. I really appreciate you being here. If this episode resonated with you, the best way to support the show is to follow, leave us a rating or review, or just share this episode with someone else who you think might find it comforting or useful. I hope to see you back here soon.